Welcome everybody. Today I would like to discuss the Bretton Woods Institutions. That is, in short, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank and the World Trade Organization. First of all, in a nutshell, the International Monetary Fund is responsible for overseeing the world's global currency mechanism. The World Bank is responsible for investments in developing countries, and the World Trade Organization is responsible for lowering the trade barriers between the countries worldwide. Right now, I would like to focus a little bit more on the exact functions of the International Monetary Fund. The IMF has four main functions. That is, a surveillance function, a technical assistance function, lending money, and their famous special drawing rights. In essence, surveillance function means that countries within the sphere of the IMF give each other advice on how to improve their financial system and their currency system. The technical function of the IMF means that the IMF in itself is a resource of information and data, and the IMF will also advise the countries on how to improve their currency system and financial system. A third function is that the IMF lends money to countries who have an immediate need of paying foreign debts. This means that some countries might find it difficult to pay off their foreign debts because they're running out of money, and in that sense the IMF might grant them a loan. The thing is that this loan comes with the principle of IMF conditionality, and that means that the IMF will demand certain economic reforms in exchange for this loan. This is, by the way, highly criticized by some countries. And the last function is the function of the special drawing rights. Special drawing rights are book entries that represent a hypothetical claim to a big money basket. And in this money basket you will find the strongest currencies in the world. So relatively, this is a very stable currency to pay off your foreign debts. Now, let's move on to the World Bank. As a matter of fact, there is no such thing as the World Bank. We have two things we have to take into consideration here. On the one hand, we have the World Bank that is composed of two institutions. This is not one institution. And we have the World Bank Group that is composed of 5 institutions. And I would like to discuss all of them right now. First of all, we have the two institutions that are the World Bank. That is the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development on the one hand, and that is the International Development Association on the other hand. What they have in common is that both institutions are a bank that invests directly in developing countries. The difference between the two is that the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development invests in mid-income countries, whereas the International Development Association invests in low-income countries. Now, next to that, we have some other institutions that at some point facilitate trade or doing business in the context of developing countries. First, there is the International Finance Corporation. This institution predominantly stimulates investments in the private sector in developing countries. So these are direct investments in companies in developing countries. Second, there is the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. This is an institution that at some point wants to reduce the risks of investments in developing countries done by private undertakings of developed countries. Last, we have the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes. This is some sort of a mediation body that will try to settle a conflict between a company from a developed country and a government of a developing country, because at some point the company might feel that it is being neglected or discriminated or ill-treated by the government of a developing country. The third Bretton Woods institution I would like to discuss here is the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization, in essence, has 4 main jobs. The first job is to lower trade barriers between countries. The second job is to promote fair competition between companies. The third job is to encourage developing countries. And the last job is to set up some sort of a system to settle disputes between countries in the international economic arena. Now, the lowering of trade barriers is mostly done by upholding 2 main principles. That is the most favored nation principle on the one hand and the national treatment principle on the other hand. The most favored nation principle means that if you grant a favor to one country as a country, you should extend this favor to all other countries as well. In that sense, you have basically the obligation to treat each country in a similar way. The national treatment principle means you are not supposed to, at some point, abuse your national policies to still discriminate against foreign products. It could be done by value-added tax, when you impose a value-added tax on a product that is predominantly imported from other countries. When you increase this value-added tax, well, in essence, you are not directly discriminating because the rule applies to all producers in the world. However, in practice, this value-added tax that has been increased will only affect foreign companies, and as a result, it is discriminating against foreign companies. That would then be a violation of the national treatment principle. Well, the second job of the World Trade Organization was fair competition. Within the sphere of the WTO, we try to uphold rules for companies that at some point forbid dumping, for instance, or rules for countries that they are not allowed to subsidize their local economies. This all to avoid unfair competition. A third function is to encourage developing countries. What we see in the negotiation processes preceding the treaties that are adopted in the context of the WTO is that there is some special treatment sometimes for developing countries. However, we must not be so optimistic about that. What we also see is in the negotiation processes that the developing countries in itself are sometimes very angry because they don't always feel heard by the richer countries. They do not always consider it a fair thing that they have to lower their own trade barriers just like that. The last function of the WTO is the settlement of disputes. For that, we have the dispute settlement body, the DSB, that will try first to mediate between disputing countries when there is a conflict on trade. And if that doesn't work out, the dispute settlement body will basically produce a ruling in which it decides which of the two disputing countries is right and which is wrong. This might lead to, for instance, the damage compensation, or this also might lead to the potential to undertake retaliation actions against the country that was wrong in the end. After watching this video log, I hope you've learned a little bit more about the Bretton Woods Institutions in a nutshell. If you want to know a little bit more about the Bretton Woods Institutions, then you might consult Chapter 5 of this wonderful book, International Law and Business, A Global Introduction, that happens to be written by Dr. Wernert himself. For more information, check www.drwernert.com or like Dr. Wernert at Facebook. That is www.facebook.com/Dr. Wernert. Thank you.